lanes, that would be most appreciated.
Oh, well, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, sorry.
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr. Chair, since they're asking me, all right. I actually think that we are in danger, of course, of having peace break out, which is a good thing. The electric vehicles are something, and I want to address some of the concerns raised by the previous two speakers. Electric vehicles are something I'm quite keen on, and I think a lot of members of Parliament are. They are quite expensive at the moment, but there's a really simple way around that. Manufacturers could start making cheaper cars, and some already are doing that. The thing is that cars come in prices, whether they're petrol-powered, diesel-powered or electric-powered, in all sorts of different models and different prices. And at the moment, there's just not the large second-hand market in New Zealand that we are used to having and do have in terms of petrol and diesel. And one of the issues that Ms Moroney's just called out, that we could solve that by having all the government fleet in it. Well, possibly, except that there is another little issue, and that's the issue of how long batteries last in these cars and what is happening to those batteries at the end of it. And I've had the privilege of going to see electric cars being made, and one particular make of car has a batteries, I should say, that go multiple batteries that actually form the chassis of the car, essentially, which works really well until I said, well, what happens when they die? And the answer was, well, they're guaranteed for 10 years. And I said, well, in New Zealand, 10 years does not make an old car. So what happens then? And the answer was, oh, well, you could get a new one. And I said, and how much is that? And it's $25,000 US. And I said, well, that's all a bit difficult. And then the other issue I raised was, what about recycling, and what about what happens with the environmental disposal of it? So I think, it's not everything, but I think, the electric vehicle certainly does deal with some of the emissions issues that we have, and I think that it is actually the way of the future, and all these things are going to come to fruition. And of course, every car maker would love us to be able to give all sorts of subsidies. And of course, some countries do, but there are also countries that give subsidies for everything else, and we've pretty much got rid of those. A cheeky question could be, what happens when they're crushed? And of course, there could be issues, particularly if those batteries are so much part of the chassis. But anyway, I think it's certainly very interesting. In terms of things like the use of the bus lanes or the special lanes or whatever, that's why this bill doesn't actually say that they're going to be using it. It actually gives the ability of NZTA and also local authorities to decide which of these special lanes can be used for electric vehicles, because the point is well made that not all of these special lanes are going to be suitable, either because of the vast numbers of public, let's say, buses going through them, or vast numbers of various other reasons. So that's going to be left up to the local authorities and New Zealand Transport Agency to decide. I think it's also quite good to deal with an issue around how else we can encourage them. And the point was made, we could have a government fleet in it. That's obviously not a part of this bill. I would also hasten to add, you want to be a bit careful with that you don't try and determine when, for instance, say, police cars would all be electric. That might be a weeny bit of a problem, given the time that it takes to charge cars at the moment, and even with the superchargers that are available one's available in Hamilton, another one I think is being opened up on the road, Napier-Taupo Road, even they take about 35 minutes to charge, and otherwise a vehicle could take 3 to 4 hours to charge. And you just can't sit around saying, I'm going to wait for the police car to charge up. So it really is, I think, electric vehicles are going to become even more popular in New Zealand when we end up with them taking as little time to charge as it does for people to put petrol or diesel in their car. Then I think we're really talking. But personally, I think that they are the way of the future. And it's just a matter of making sure that we get enough volume coming through. So this is something that is to encourage that. And Mr. Speaker, I've visited places like Norway and California in particular to look at some of the things that they're doing around electric vehicles. And both of those countries do have this provision around electric vehicles being able to use special lanes. And they do consider that as something that encourages them. Norway, of course, puts big taxes on imports of cars generally, and they, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Judith Collins.
And Mr. Speaker, but they don't have those on electric vehicles. So they suggested that we could not put big taxes on top of electric vehicles. So I had to point out we don't actually put big taxes on top of vehicles that are imported into the country in the first place, which they thought was unusual. And they said, well, we got rid of it in the 80s, you know, so that's when we're a free market country. And the other issue that California suggested that we might like to make all of our car manufacturers manufacture electric vehicles, which is what they've brought in. And I said, well, that would be excellent too, except we don't manufacture any cars, so that's not going to work, is it? So really, we are down to the these particular lanes. We also have something else that we do for electric vehicles and electric vehicle owners, and that is that they do not contribute to the cost of the roads. And that is something people need to realise, that when diesel users pay their RUC charges, they are paying towards the money into the National Road Transport Fund, or Land Transport Fund, I should say it's called. And in addition to that, people who pay for petrol, we are actually paying for that as well, and that's part of the cost. So about 90 cents of a litre cost of fuel, petrol, actually goes towards our road transport. And that pays not only for the roads themselves, but also policing of the road. So a big chunk of that goes into road policing, and it also goes towards public transport as well. So it helps to meet the costs of public transport. So it's actually, you know, people who pay for petrol and diesel are contributing on a user pays, plus they're also contributing for public transport. So actually electric vehicle owners are actually being given an exemption, which is being carried over, so that they don't contribute to that. So they are getting quite a substantial drop in the costs that they would otherwise be paying for. And that's because the roads are not generally paid out of the consolidated fund, out of the general budget. So I think it's really important that we understand that we are giving certain subsidies. And I think what's going to happen is that as charging stations become more available, as people get their heads around the fact that they can actually buy second-hand electric vehicles from places like Japan, or that manufacturers start producing cars that don't have to be at the luxury end of the market all the time, and start bringing in the competition that there is in the petrol and diesel markets, we're going to find more electric vehicles becoming more commonly seen and used in New Zealand. And I understand, you know, I mean, really, I think many people, if you worked at home and lived at home and you normally travelled in a car to the city or dropped off kids and various other things that people do, electric vehicle makes a lot of sense, particularly if you can charge up the vehicle at night and it's fully going in the morning. But there's still quite some time to go. I can also tell the House, because I know that you'll be interested, I hope you'll be interested, is that I've seen electric trucks being put together too, and I know that there's electric bus being trialled at this stage in Wellington. And I went to the place where this is being manufactured, and by a New Zealander, I should say, in San Francisco, Mr. Ian Wright, and who was one of the founders of Tesla, by the way. Just a plug for New Zealanders in there. And so I think, you know, things like garbage trucks or rubbish trucks and things like that are being converted over for electric motors. And what this means, of course, it makes a lot of sense, because they're going out during the day or night and they're coming back again, back to the station. They're not going on long treks anywhere. And it would also deal with issues like noise pollution, which I think is a really important thing, particularly in cities, as well as the emissions. So it all seems to make sense, but I think we just need to learn sometimes to crawl before we can run. And in this case, we're making steady changes and improvements. And I think we have made some very sensible improvements that don't unduly penalise other road users, but do actually give some really great incentives. And living in Auckland as I do, any chance to be able to use those special lanes would be much welcomed, and may well encourage me down the path the next time I come to buy a vehicle to move into the electric space, because sitting behind all those other cars, I'd just love to be able to whiz by and do so legally. Thank you.
Question? Oh, that's your temper.
Sorry, was it?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.